Hello and welcome to the it-agile podcast Einfach gelöst. That translates to solved in a simple way, or a more subtle meaning could be being relaxed. And I'm very happy to have JeffDe Luca here today. Hello, Jeff. May you introduce yourself?
Oh, well, okay. Well, my name's JeffDe Luca. I am currently happily retired. I've been retired since September 2018. And let's see, well, before that, I guess, in the context of Agile, I'm most well known for being the founder or creator of feature-driven development, FDD. But I have a long, IT career doing many other things, mainly around, software delivery and projects, etc. But for the last several years of my career before I retired, I actually went into like the C-suite at a very large corporate, multinational, and actually enjoyed that quite a lot and learned a bit out of that as well, meaning that not just focusing on the change aspect, which is what projects are about, but what they call the BAU or business as usual aspect as well of running an IT organization.
So let's go a bit deeper into FDD, since that was the topic that led to our first encounter more than 10 years ago, where you were at it-agile to teach us actually FDD. What is the foundation of FDD? When was it created?
Okay, well, let's see, going to stretch my memory here on dates. FDD got badged and came to prominence out of a large project in Singapore for United Overseas Bank. I guess for me, FDD was just the way I ran projects for most of my time. But on that project, I came together. I brought in Peter Code to lead the modelling activity for us, and Peter brought to the table the idea of fine-grained features. I'm not sure what the source of that was. Actually, it may have been with Peter. It may have probably came from somewhere else, but. He brought to the table the idea of fine-grained features, and then that's right. Color modeling was also actually invented on that project, which we could sidestep to if necessary. But that was entirely a Peter Code thing. But it was birthed in Singapore on that project at that time, and I guess afterwards, Peter felt that the color modeling in particular was really significant, and he wanted to write about that. So he started working on a book, himself and Eric Lefebvre, and then he wanted to bring me in on that because he also wanted to describe FDD, which was what he saw as, hey, well, here's the process for better delivery and being agile and more responsive and etc. And so that's. It was kind of after the fact how it got birthed. Another thread with this was during that time, that project was one of the largest Java projects in the world. And so we would be visited by Sun Micro and JavaSoft, from time to time. And there was one of those visits, it was from John Gage, who was the chief scientist at Sun Micro. And I went to lunch with him, myself and the CIO. We were talking with John, and I think Alan Baratz, the CEO of JavaSoft, was there. And John was telling us about the things he was into and some of the other roles he played outside of just working for Sun Micro, such as helping with APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Forum, and so forth, representing the US, and and helping with think tanks and that sort of thing. And so he was talking about these different approaches he would use for how they would run such sessions. And so I started talking about, well, what we do is, we brought all our users in. We got these coloured Post-it notes, and we stick them up on bits of flip chart paper, and present and merge and collaborate like that, and to flesh out what this thing ought to be. And I remember he got really animated about this, and he was kind of kept challenging me on it. Like I said, well, who's your project anthropologist? Who's writing this stuff down? And so it was really that meeting with him and discussion with him that kind of pushed me to then go back to Peter Code and say, yeah, okay, let's write about this. And so that's kind of how it came to be. But, then I sat down with Peter over a weekend, and he just turned on a tape recorder, and we talked for like, 20 hours or something. And, and out of that emerged an outline of a chapter on FDD, which ended up going in that book, and the rest is kind of history.
When this first FDD project, when did it happen roughly? Was it before or after the Agile Manifesto?
Yeah, it's before. Well, I went over to Singapore, I think in 85, 86. And I was working on like a forerunner to this project where a different, I don't want to name and shame, so a different big consulting company and IT firm were kind of running the thing. I was just like a dev manager, if you like. And then that failed rather spectacularly. And then the bank picked it up and took it over and asked me to run it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was in mid-1997. And then the actual kickoff, I think the modelling session started around September, October, which is when I flew Peter in and we brought the business in, and when we started doing the colour poster notes and the chart. Yeah.
You said the project was large. How large was it?
Well, I mean, how would you answer that question? Like what's the measure? It was to build a commercial lending system for a major bank. And it was front office, middle office, and back office. And it spanned consumer, commercial and corporate, and private banking. So roughly about 1/3 of an entire bank.
Mm-hmm.
So that's possibly the best way to describe like the scope of the thing. I mean, project team and headcount or whatever, that all depends or whatever. But the direct IT project team was around about 50 people.
I guess most of the listeners don't know FDD or color modeling. So let's try to get that a bit more details about that. How would you describe FDD?
Yeah, okay. Let's see. So as I said, FDD came out of the way I ran projects, and my business was I had my own consulting, if you like, boutique consulting company, but we ran projects, did delivery, and took on the risk. So I would bid for software development projects at commercial and corporate companies, fixed price. Right? So I'm carrying the risk. So that's the context. And obviously, what you need when you're doing that kind of work then is, you need some way to establish upfront, well, how big do we think this thing's actually going to be? What's it going to take? How can I lay out a plan that's going to be accurate? And then that I can track with accuracy and report meaningfully back to the client. So that's kind of the context or the shape, if you like, of where it comes from. So FDD is 5 processes. The first 3 processes are what we would call the startup phase of a project. The next 2 processes are what we would typically call like the construction phase of a project. So the first 3 processes begin with one called develop an overall model, and that's the activity where we bring in the business people together with our the chief programmers from the IT side. And we collaboratively do flesh out what the let's say the real requirements are. What subset of the problem domain are we trying to tackle in this particular project here? That was done using color modeling, so which is we'll come back to separately. But that was using color modeling. So we have like 4 color post-it notes. Each of these colors represents a particular archetype in the model. And basically, we break into teams. 3 groups of 3 is a good set of numbers. You say 1 business person, 2 IT in each team, and they would do question and answer amongst themselves, and they would then build up a model, a class diagram, right, in response to that. each of the teams, and when we're done, and these iterations don't run very long. So these sessions would run, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes or something. And then each team would come back and present one by one, and the group will ask questions, right? And sometimes you'll go back for a second round or whatever, but if not, but when we're done, then we would take those three models and merge them together into one, using the best understanding across the three based on the Q&A and then feedback and critiquing that's gone on. And that would then become, that's the shape for this little part of this little section of the domain that we just described. There's kind of a lot to that, actually. The thing about, the written word is, which is why, the big stack of requirements documents is folly, is the written word's actually very vague. And I think Jerry Weinberg gave a great example a long time ago of that Mary had a little lamb. 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 It's like, okay, which one of the five meanings is it? It's such a simple sentence. So the thing about models is they're very visually explicit. They're very expressive, and like something's related to it is something else or it's not. It has a cardinality of 0 or 1 or 1 to many or it doesn't. And those cardinalities in particular, they're very explicit, they're very expressive, and a lot of discussion happens around those things. Well, is it really 0 to many, this relationship, or is it 1 to many? Or, does the customer have to have an address, or is it optional, or, you know what I mean? And so you get a lot of really high quality discussion and conversation going on because these diagrams are so visually explicit. And when that activity is done, that knowledge is taken, and the IT folk go away, and then they'll build what we call a features list. And the features list is simple functional decomposition of the domain. So it's categorized. We call the top level categories, we call them subject areas. So it might be, the customer, or the origination of a loan, or approving a loan, or, or calculating risk. And then within each of the subject areas, we have the next level of decomposition we call business activities. And then for each business activity, there's basically, well, what are the steps that you need to take to get that done? And those steps are written out as features. Features are very fine-grained. They should take no more than 2 weeks to fully complete, which means, design, build, test, and promote to build. But they often are much shorter than that. Right? So 2 weeks is like the limit, but they're often much shorter than that. And then the third upfront activity, which was called develop an overall plan, basically lays out these, the development, the construction phase oriented around which features are going to get done when, and since features belong to business activities and subject areas, we can develop nice visual representations of that work being tracked and reported through the construction phase. That works really well for business because that entire diagram, subject areas, business activities, the steps that are needed, the client valued features, that's entirely expressed in the language of the problem domain, in the language of the business. And so as we're moving through construction, the business can see in their own language what's actually being done, what are they working on right now, what's finished, what's not, etc. So that's kind of the startup phase. That startup phase is typically 1 week's worth of activity for every 3 months of construction time. So if you thought this was going to be a 6-month construction effort, you'd spend 2 weeks doing this entire effort. Right? So it's not a very heavy upfront process, but it's a very important one. And then we fall into construction, where we basically design and build by feature one by one. Now, I say one by one, they would get batched into things we call work packages, and then that work package will get pushed through design and build. And then basically you iterate on that, or increment, as FDD would like to say, and until you're done. That's kind of the gist of it.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, that's a question I haven't been asked in a long time.
Okay. Okay, cool. And do I remember correctly that when the features are built, FDD doesn't use long-term stable teams, but
Long-term
creates the
stable
teams
teams.
per every 2-week cycle. Was that correct?
Okay. Now I understand what you're saying.
Mm.
Yeah, so in the project model, and we can talk later on about, well, okay, so what changed after that? Because,
Mm.
one of the things I did was, I took the project structure out because where I got to was, I believe, more in the product model and the project model. But
Mm.
let's talk about classic FDD, if you like. So in the project model, you're going to have a group of developers of what we would call problem domain developers. We'd have system interface developers. You have user interface developers. And by the nature of whichever features we decide are going to get designed and built now in this particular work package, right? Oh, I've left out one piece. We also have the concept of class owners, right? So the whole thing's object-oriented. We've been coming off these class diagrams. So each class has an owner, a person, and therefore the selection of the features in a work package dictates which group of developers are going to be involved in designing and building that work package. And those teams, are forming and reforming all the time based on whichever features are selected to go through design and build. So, that part's dynamic. The people that are, if you like, assigned to the project are not. Right? You want them for the life of the project. Yeah.
Funny side note here. When I learned FDD, this kind of teamwork felt strange for me. Since I was in this we need to have stable teams dogma.
Mm-hmm.
And roughly perhaps 20 years after your 1997 thing, we in a way rediscovered this idea. And now we call these concepts fluid teams.
Okay.
That for certain contexts, it may be more efficient to have unstable teams. So that it may be more efficient since with the unstable or fluid teams, we may be better able to align with the business needs. So, and in a way, I think that, or I guess that was one of the ideas in FDD also with the team building.
It's this a complex topic, and I think that to fully answer what you just raised, I'd need to talk about non-project or product versus project, which is possibly a topic best left for a little later. But the notion of the CP teams or the feature teams forming and reforming in FDD really came around from the fact that it's FDD had a belief that class ownership was a better model. And because you get better consistency of, you think about OO, right? You want, encapsulation and consistency of interface, and you'll get better consistency of implementation and interface with the same person working on the same component, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is how all, at the time, large-scale software development was done inside like IBM labs and et cetera. Which is where I picked up on that concept back in the 80s, as we now know. So, for example, when I was working on System 36 at the time for IBM in one of its US labs, Dolomite was one of the big components in the operating system. It was the librarian. If you wanted to talk to Dolomite, that was Marguerite Doman. If I wanted to know more than what was in the published spec, I'd go talk to Marguerite Doman. Marguerite is Dolomite, and so that sort of thing. So that's where the thread or nugget of that kind of concept came from. But it also gave us then this ability to have groups of people come together, but under the tutelage of chief programmers. So chief programmers are the 10 to 50x people. They were the people that were involved up front doing the modeling with the business. They were the people that decomposed into the features, provided input to make the plan. And then they're the leads through the design and build, right? So we want to mentor and transfer skill and transfer knowledge as quickly as possible. But I don't want to do it as inefficiently as, say, pair programming, where the overhead's, 1-to-1. In FDD, the CP to P ratio is more like 1 to 4 to 5, right? So it's just, I don't know, to me, it felt natural, but it was a more efficient way to deal with those kind of concerns.
Mm-hmm.
I think being more business aligned is an interesting discussion. I think product versus project is a better way to address that. But to come back to FDD, as I says, expresses everything in terms of the problem domain, in terms of the business. Right? So the business are the ones that they describe their problem. We turn that into a model. We turn that into client-valued features, and then we design and build by client-valued feature. So we don't have features that are like, install the database or configure indexes, or everything's done in underneath some sort of client-valued feature, a fine-grained one. So that's the business focus aspect of FDD, and which I found it always made it really well received. I mean, when you showed what that was called, that parking lot diagram, which is one of the ways you could visually show the progress of the project, that thing was very, very successful. It would resonate with business strongly, right up to the C-suite.
Let's go a bit into color modeling.
Right. Color modeling. Color modeling was just a refinement of codes, like approach to modeling. He already had in his head when he came to us in September, October '97. I mean, he already had this idea of there were four major class categories, if you like, that he tended to see again and again, and they had certain characteristics. And on that day, there'd happened to be a bunch of post-it notes, coloured post-it notes on the conference table, 4 colours. He had 4 class categories he wanted to share with us as a way to think about this. And on the spur of the moment, 4 class categories, 4 colours, he associated the two, and off it kind of went from there. And it was later on that we realised that there was something really profound going on here, something deeper, because people were much more productive using that approach. People that were less, let's say, experienced at modelling or whatever, were able to get into it more easily. And so it was after the fact he went back to look into, okay, well, what's going on here? What's it about? And started to write about it. So it was really the idea that there were these 4 major class categories or types of classes that you see again and again. And he coloured them. So there's a green, which is a party, place, or thing. There's only one of those and has some sort of unique identity. A person might have a tax number or a social security number or whatever. A company has some sort of business number. Pinks, moments or intervals of time. They happen in a moment in time or over a period of time. They tend to represent things that are important and need to be tracked. You could think of that as perhaps a transaction or something like that. You have a yellow, which is a role being played or a way of participating in something. And just as, people can wear different hats or play multiple roles. And then a blue is a description. It's like a category of something that describes a category of something that happens again and again. And for each of these archetypes, then they suggest, here's the typical attributes you'd expect to see for one of these. Here's the typical methods you'd see for one of these. More or less, you won't always see all these attributes. You won't always see all these methods. But then it was dynamic as well. It was when you see a yellow and a green, they tend to associate in this way, and they tend to interact in this way. So they tend to associate as with a particular relationship and cardinality, and then you tend to see typical interactions from pink, green to yellow, or yellow down to pink. So such as in a yellow, methods like assess performance or assess value to business, these types of things. And so that was kind of the secret sauce with it all, which is like once you stuck down a green, a yellow, a pink, and a blue on the sheet, you automatically had a whole lot of content and associations and interactions you're expecting to see. And that would really help you drive the model and then challenge whether, okay, is this the right way to think about what we just heard?
Mm-hmm.
That's a short description of it, but I guess I do need to point out. So FDD got written up as part of Peter's color modeling book, but FDD doesn't prescribe, that you have to do color modeling. If you think about that upfront process, its purpose is there needs to be some sort of informational or analytical activity to get enough knowledge to be able to lay out this client valued features list and then build a plan with high accuracy and have it be meaningful to the business. Right? That's the problem we all have. If you're bidding for fixed price, construction work, right? That's the problem you've got. So it's just color modeling and doing it in the small teams and doing the present and merge or whatever is the best approach I ever saw to do that. And like I say, that kind of just happened collaboratively in Singapore at that time. But FDD, doesn't actually prescribe that. Okay, that's the way you have to do that. It's if you can substitute any other informational analytical activity that we can derive the same knowledge, then great, we're in good shape.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So I just looked it up. The book, I read that years ago, is called Java Modeling in Color with UML. And I think it's a bit misleading since from my, as far as I remember, it doesn't have to do much with Java and not with UML. So.
Well, the syntax is UML, or the notation is UML, and
Mm-hmm.
you've got to go back in time. At the time, that was topical, especially to Peter, because he had his own notation, code notation, right? And then there was also, oh God, you stretch my memory now, Jacobson or whatever had his own, and
Mm-hmm.
right. And so, Grady came along with UML, and UML was kind of steamrolling everything, and so it was around about that era, or just before, I think, where Peter had kind of, recanted's not the right word, I guess, but basically conceded. It's like, okay, we've got to go with UML here. It's now the 800-pound gorilla. I'm going to dispense with code notation. We'll go with UML. So that's I guess a little bit of the era and context. But yeah, I do agree with you on the title of the book, and it's not ironically, it's not a great book actually either, because it was well intentioned, but the book's fairly inaccessible. So what Peter's thinking was at the time was, forget to remember, there was the Gang of Four Patterns book had been around, I don't know, a few years prior, and while that was good, what people were telling Peter, and I know I was one of them, was like, well, yeah, look, that's great. You got the pattern for this, I don't know, this algorithmic thing or this other IT thing. Where's the pattern for order entry? Where's the pattern for doing a general ledger? Yeah. Where's the pattern for product catalog? And Peter was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Everywhere I go, this is Peter, this is what I do. I'm showing people how to model those, repeating business patterns or whatever. So that was the motivation for him to do it. So he hooked up with this guy, Eric, who didn't have any object expertise, but was like an ERP kind of expert and had built big ERP, worked on big ERP systems for many, many years. And so Peter tapped on his model knowledge and built these color models. And so it's like, so here's a model for product catalog, and here's a model for order entry, and here's a model for and so on and so forth. So it was a great idea, and it was a real need, and it's still really valuable. And if anyone ever wants to build a product catalog, I highly recommend you. When you go, the solution's right there. And you start, it's archetypal, so you start customizing it to your needs. But to come at the book cold, it just kind of it's hard. It's like, well, here's this model. There's a few pages of description. It's like, wow, man, it's without having been there for the walkthrough or whatever, it's hard to absorb. So, but the book was a bestseller. It did very well. But yeah.
But it's the only source for the color modeling, right?
It is the only source for color modeling. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Okay.
It's stretching my memory a lot here. Now, I assume there's a chapter at the front before it gets into all the models where he outlines color modeling. Well, I hope he did anyway. I mean, and so that would be the place to go. If not, I don't think I ever published thoughts on it. I mean, you would have seen me do one though. Yeah, I'm not sure if I know Peter did. Like, he went and spoke at Java 1 and did a 30, 40 minutes on color modeling, which was a really good session. I don't know if those things are online anymore or not, but that would be a great way to get an overview of what it is and what it's about.
FDD was invented with this fixed price project background, and you mentioned that there was adaptation for a product model.
Well, I guess you're going forward a lot of years now from 97, but when did this happen? Well, I guess even before the product thing came along, I had the feeling that having to orient around projects wasn't always going to be the best way of structuring things.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess let's talk about maybe where I ended up. So now I'm C-suite at a large telco, a really big telco, right? In one particular country. And it's got an international presence in multiple other countries with other operators. And it's also got a big telco in Australia that reported into it. So I was looking after all of that in the digital space. Yeah. And so, now you're not just running a change organization, you're running a big business as usual organization as well. Yeah. And I really got to learn a lot from that. And so it was there where I kind of crystallized then it's time to move away from project structures. And product versus project was one way of thinking about that. Now, again, back to my time in IBM back in the 80s, working in the labs doing product development for IBM. I mean, that's where a lot of that was rooted. However, at this particular time, it was actually, I stumbled across a couple of pages that Martin Fowler had written on this topic. And it didn't source with him. It sourced somewhere else. I can't remember that person's name right now, so apologies to whoever that was. But Martin wrote that up, and cited this person, and talked about product versus project as something that ought to be considered. So if you think about a typical IT organization in some sort of corporate, let me ramble here a few minutes because there's kind of several dimensions to this. But the structures you might have, the permanent structures you might have a permanent architecture team and a permanent testing team, a permanent group of project managers. I mean, God, I hope not, but that's common, right? Yeah, mm-hmm. And that sort of thing. But then projects are formed to deliver whatever it is the business wants in this particular fiscal year. And the project teams are temporary. They come together, they do their work, they disband, right? It's these other structures that are permanent. And that's completely the wrong way to think about it, right? So what we really want is we want permanent delivery teams that are business oriented, right? And they stay together, right, for the duration. So the thing that's permanent is the thing that's actually delivering value, right? And the team then would be oriented around business KPIs, not IT KPIs, like, on time or on budget or whatever, right? You would rather be oriented around business things. So I'll give you a simple example, but it was one that resonated well. So if you think about, again, let's stay in that telco space. So you've got what they call the online sales funnel, which has a conversion rate. So you go to the telco homepage, and you'll navigate to, I don't know, mobile phones. You'll navigate to plans. You look at models, and eventually, hopefully, for them, that ends up with someone purchasing something. That whole thing is called a sales funnel or whatever, and the metric from here to an order is called the or at each step you call the conversion rate. And so obviously the higher you can get that conversion rate up, the more business you're going to do. Yeah. So if you had a team that was oriented around that, right? So that's their job, right? So if you imagine we'll come to build run in a second, but a build run team that's they sit at the one table, on the wall or on the monitors or whatever there is that funnel. It's like every step of this chain or whatever. And basically all they're doing for the year is, how do we refine this? How do we make that better? How do we get the conversion rate up? What would it take to do? Yeah. And that would be their KPI, right?
Yeah.
So then that would be a product mode team, and it's funded on a rolling basis, e.g. for a year at a time, just like the business would be, right? You'd have periodic reviews, of course, and then whatever work they happen to do would be classified as CapEx or OpEx, not the other way around, which is what project structures enforce. Yeah. So you fund the team, and then you would classify the work as CapEx or OpEx, rather than what's done typically is you fund the work and classify the people. Right? So you move from these, what I would call outdated schedule and budget IT KPIs and get to more business-aligned KPIs. Strategic business changes, business outcomes, improving online take-up, reducing shopping cart abandonment, improving the conversion rate, these sorts of things. And these teams are persistent. And ideally, what I wanted was you have the business sitting with you as well, right? So it's this joint kind of team. And I called them build run teams. And I think that name, I think, came from Amazon. I might need a show note to come back and clarify where I got that from. I just off the top of my head can't recall right now, but I think it was an Amazon concept. But basically, it's a build run team. You build it, they're running it, supporting it, right, as well. So again, if you think of the traditional structure where we've got this temporary team that comes together, the project team, they do their bit of work for 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, they disband, and it's someone else's problem then what happens to that thing now that it's in production, and maintaining it or supporting it going forward. Where the build run team is no, you build it, you run it, you deploy it, you own it, you love it. Yeah. Okay. So that was kind of where I guess I'd evolved to by the time I came to retirement or whatever. And so FDD was had to be adapted, if you like, to then come out of what was originally a very project oriented structure to one that I just described that's really not project oriented at all, right? It's a persistent team that's funded on a rolling basis, doing work. Yeah.
Thank you for the insights. The FDD training I participated in when you were in Hamburg was one of the most influential trainings I ever had. I never did FDD by the book, but I used color modeling. I used the idea of creating an overall model for larger things. With color modeling or other techniques. I use the format for creating the feature list.
Yeah.
And I use nearly every time parking lot diagrams for communicating progress.
Well, thanks for the feedback. But that's very much in the spirit of FDD and in the spirit of Agile. I mean, you take the bits that are going to work for you, and whatever you're doing at any particular point in time, it's not prescriptive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you very much for your insight.